Well, it's finally happened. Today, a Labour MP went on national television and openly called for Sir Keir Starmer to go.
If you would consider, or if you will rule out challenging Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister.
Burnham versus Mahmood migration clash. Andy Burnham just reignited Labour's civil war by publicly criticizing Shabana Mahmood's migration plans while simultaneously being offered a parliamentary seat by an MP who wants him to challenge Keir Starmer for the leadership. So now we've got the Greater Manchester Mayor positioning himself as the reasonable alternative to hardline asylum reforms, Labour MPs literally trying to gift him their seats so he can mount a leadership challenge, and a Home Secretary pushing policies that are causing her own party to fracture in real time. If you thought Labour's internal divisions were bad before, congratulations, they just found a whole new level of chaos. So buckle up, because we're about to dissect how migration policy has become the latest battleground in Labour's ongoing civil war, why Andy Burnham's carefully worded criticism is basically a leadership pitch disguised as policy concern, and whether Shabana Mahmood's hardline approach will survive contact with her own backbenchers or collapse under pressure from the left. This is Labour tearing itself apart over one of the most sensitive political issues in Britain, and it's absolutely gripping to watch. Right, let's start with what Mahmood is actually proposing, because the details are genuinely radical and controversial. She's announced that refugee status will become temporary rather than permanent, subject to review every 30 months. Refugees will only be able to apply for permanent settlement after 20 years instead of the current 5 years. And crucially, after each review, refugees could be forced to return home if their country is deemed safe again. That's not tweaking the existing system, that's fundamentally reimagining how Britain treats refugees. The policy also includes plans to deport asylum seekers whose claims are refused, including families with children and even children born in the UK if their parents have no right to be here. Officials told The Times this is to ensure there are no perverse incentives for refugees to have children in the UK, thinking it'll guarantee they can stay. Mahmood insisted they won't separate parents and children, but will consult on removal of support and ensuring people are safely returned. It's hardline stuff that would have been controversial under a conservative government, let alone Labour. Mahmood justified all this by saying it's the uncomfortable truth that the UK's generous asylum offer compared to other European countries is drawing people to British shores, and for taxpayers, the system feels out of control and unfair. She's essentially adopted the conservative framing of the migration debate, which is politically shrewd if you're trying to win back voters who went to reform, but ideologically challenging if you're supposed to be Labour. And into this incredibly sensitive situation walks Andy Burnham, who's being positioned by some Labour MPs as the alternative to Starmer, with criticism that's perfectly calibrated to sound reasonable while completely undermining Mahmood's approach. He told BBC Radio 4's Today program that he agrees the system needs root and branch reform, but has concerns about leaving people unable to settle. That's political speak for, this is a terrible idea, but I'm going to phrase my opposition as constructive concern. Burnham's specific worry is that constantly checking whether countries are safe enough for refugees to return will limit the Home Office's ability to deal with the backlog and leave people in limbo unable to integrate, which is a legitimate concern that also happens to be a devastating criticism of the entire policy framework. He's saying the practical effect of Mahmood's reforms will make the system worse, not better, while wrapping it in language that sounds like helpful advice. When asked specifically about the 20-year wait for permanent status, Burnham said, "I have concerns about that particular element of the plans. I think it will leave people in a position where they don't know whether they're staying or potentially leaving." He's positioning himself as the voice of pragmatism and compassion versus Mahmood's hardline approach. And given that he's being touted as a potential leadership challenger, this isn't just policy criticism, it's political positioning. The timing is absolutely crucial here. Clive Lewis, the Labour MP for Norwich South, has literally offered to stand down from Parliament so Burnham can have his seat and challenge Starmer for the leadership. That's not subtle maneuvering, that's an open invitation for regime change. And Burnham responds by publicly critiquing one of the government's flagship policies on one of the most politically sensitive issues facing Britain. If he wanted to demonstrate he's a different kind of leader with different priorities than the current government, he couldn't have picked a better moment. The phrase, "I'm not going to say that the Home Secretary is wrong to call for this level of change," is particularly masterful because it sounds supportive while actually being anything but. It's the political equivalent of, "I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying everything you're proposing will make things worse." He's maintaining plausible deniability about directly opposing the policy while making crystal clear he thinks it's fundamentally flawed. What makes this particularly explosive is that it's not just Burnham criticizing. A number of Labour MPs had also come out against Mahmood's plans, suggesting there's genuine backbench discontent with the hardline approach. When your own MPs are openly questioning your flagship policy on a make-or-break issue like migration, you've got a serious problem with party management and ideological cohesion. The left-wing criticism Mahmood referenced, accusations of engaging with far-right talking points, is particularly pointed. Green Party and Labour backbenchers are essentially saying that by adopting tough rhetoric on migration, Labour is legitimizing Reform UK's framing of the issue rather than offering a distinct Labour alternative. It's a debate about political strategy as much as policy substance. Do you meet voters where they are on migration concerns, or do you try to change the conversation entirely? Mahmood and Burnham represent these two different visions, and the party is being forced to choose between them.